Good afternoon and welcome to the Eide webinar on supply chain management. Good afternoon, sorry. My name is Dino Forfante. I'm Director of Business Development at Eide. Today we'll be going through and talking about your supply chain management and taking it to the next level with NetSuite. NetSuite is continuously working with customers to understand better how they run and monitor their complex supply chains. Today we're going to explore a few examples of that and how they can benefit your business. Here's what we'll be reviewing today. First, we'll introduce our team on the phone and give you an introduction to Eide and who we are. Then we'll introduce you to some of the new and enhanced features NetSuite has developed to help you manage your supply chain. Finally, we'll wrap up, take questions, and talk about next steps. Let's get started. As I said before, I'm Dino Forfante, Director of Business Development at Eide. I have been working with NetSuite for over 12 years as both a business owner that implemented NetSuite, as well as a director over consulting practices. I have industry experience for both Fortune 500 and mid-market companies, including many ERP systems. On the phone with me today is Ethan Haberman, who will be walking us through the webinar today. Ethan is an experienced IT manager, NetSuite implementer, and solutions engineer. He's certified in several NetSuite applications and has over 6 years experience, including NetSuite, SAP, and Microsoft. At Eide, we like to think of ourselves as advisors first and technology providers second. We only succeed when our clients succeed. And that's why our driving force every day is to help you find the best way forward. We bring our knowledge, passion, and experience to transform the way that you do business and deliver lasting results. Eide has been around for over 100 years and is a top 20 CPA accounting firm. But Eide is much more than an accounting firm. We're an award-winning consulting business advisory and professional services firm. We're driven to help our clients take on the now, the next, with inspired ideas, solutions, and results. Our teams have experience that span multiple industries using a proven services approach that focuses in on business processes and user adoption. Our practice also specializes in complementary technologies like Salesforce, CRM, data analytics, integration, and advisory services. Our service offerings are always focused on helping with today's unique challenges. Other areas of importance of our firm, which include evaluating R&D tax credits, state and local tax compliance, and providing evaluation and application assistance with the new CARES Act and small business loans. Going into supply chain management. Supply chain management is a core component of NetSuite ERP and offers powerful functionality for our organization to manage everything from basic procurement and inventory management to complex multi-location, multi-channel supply chains. Today, we'll explore a few of the tools that NetSuite has developed to ensure optimal management and insight into your supply chain and order management. Visibility and control are paramount when it comes to managing your supply chain. Whether you're selling wholesale, B2B, or B2C, being able to be proactive in managing your supply chain can be a key differentiator for your organization. As we look today at some of the functionality around supply chain management in NetSuite, you'll see a theme based on key value drivers. First off, having insight into predicted risks in your supply chain will help you increase customer responsiveness and create a happier customer. Secondarily, having more stable supply requirements makes for better vendor relationships and response. And lastly, being able to define and automate your allocation strategies will allow you to increase your operational efficiencies by only managing exceptions and not all transactions. Here are some important features that supply chain management that we'll be covering today. Starting with Supply Chain Control Tower, NetSuite has created this dashboard view to have better visibility into inventory, supply chain, and demand to effectively analyze and plan future product line production. Also looking at purchasing using existing data and machine learning to intelligently predict late orders. With the newly released Suite Analytics Workbook for supply chain, we'll be able to use data sets around our supply chain to drill down and analyze issues with orders and vendors. And lastly, using supply allocations, we'll be able to systematically allocate orders using rule-based allocation strategies while managing exceptions to ensure the right orders are getting out. Here are the demonstration topics Ethan will be presenting today. If you have any questions on these topics or anything else, our customer service managers will be able to schedule a personalized follow-up for your team. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Ethan.
Thanks, Dino. Before we start looking at some of the specific functionality, starting with the supply chain control tower, I want to make sure that you're aware of a few prerequisites that are required before you're able to fully utilize some of this functionality. First off, this feature does require NetSuite's Inventory Management Cloud Service, formerly known as Advanced Inventory. Additionally, you'll obviously need to have inventory enabled in your environment. And lastly, multi-location inventory must be enabled in your environment as well. In terms of setup, the supply chain control tower feature must be enabled in your company setup, and you must select which locations in your environment you'd like to be included in your control tower. If we navigate to Setup, Company, and Enable Features, and from there, navigate to the Items and Inventory tab, you'll see the option to enable this feature here at the bottom. Additionally, we would like to enable supply chain predicted risks as well, which will utilize machine learning to give you insights into potential late purchase orders, transfer orders, and sales orders. This can be found on the Analytics tab of Enable Features. Let's start by taking a look at the Supply Chain Control Tower dashboard. That can be found by going to Lists, Supply Chain, and Control Tower Dashboard. This is also something that we can deploy as a center tab in your environment. The first item we'll see on our dashboard is a KPI portlet with common KPIs related to supply chain and inventory in your environment. This will allow us to see current values and comparisons to other periods for metrics like current inventory value, cost of goods sold, inventory turnover, and percentages of on-time receipts and shipments. As is standard with NetSuite's dashboard KPIs, these are configurable not only for the data that is presented, but for the periods you want to complete comparisons on. For instance, if I wanted to look at my cost of goods sold for last year to this year to date, I can simply click on Setup and edit my KPI portlet to reflect that. So I'll change this range for this fiscal year to period, change my comparison range to last fiscal year to period, and hit save. Additionally, I can pop this data out into a trend graph to see how this specific KPI is trending over time. I can look at that on a yearly basis, a quarterly basis, by period, and even do period year-over-year comparisons from this view. If I look over to the left, I'll see the Alerts dashboard element. For the Control Tower dashboard, these alerts are based around our different order types that have receipts or shipments that are past due. Like other reminders in NetSuite, we can drill down into these alerts to get to the underlying transactions. If we drill down, we can get into a snapshot into our current demand and supply to gain a better understanding of why these orders are late or predicted to be late. Using this in conjunction with supply allocation, which we'll talk about soon, we'll be able to reallocate our supply to different orders if we'd like. As an example, if I click on purchase order receipts past due, I'll be able to see a list of all the transactions with details, as well as drill down into the supply chain snapshot that was used to generate this data. This view will show me our current inventory values and past due transactions. From here, I'll be able to open the transaction to determine what is going on. If I open purchase order 197 here and navigate to communication and the user notes tab, I'll be able to see that there was a note added indicating the shipment was delayed due to the vendor being shut down. On the activities tab, we'll see that a task has been created to follow up with the vendor. This will show in my reminders portlet and can have emails reminding us to follow up as well. If I navigate back to my supply chain snapshot, you'll notice there is some information about this snapshot. We can see when it was run and the past and future horizon dates that we're looking at in the snapshot. These snapshots are a key component of the supply chain control tower, and we have a lot of control of how and when they're created. If I navigate to Setup, Accounting Preferences, and Control Tower Preferences, and open this in a new tab, we'll see that we can have some default settings set here where that we'll use when creating our snapshots. These will be the parameters like past and future horizons, as well as the default days late or early with our confidence level in our different operations based on transactions. After we're setting our preferences, we can actually navigate to Lists, Supply Chain, and supply chain snapshot schedules to see and create schedule or any existing schedules for our snapshots. As we can see here, we have a schedule set to run every night at 10 p.m. We can also utilize a saved search, as you can see here, to determine which items we want to be a part of a specific schedule to query. We can manage multiple schedules depending on the items that we have in these saved searches. Let's go ahead and navigate back to our supply chain control tower here. Picking up where we left off, the predicted risks portlet here at the bottom displays risks you should address to prevent potential problems in the future based on user entry predicted risks on vendor records. When you click on a card in this portlet, the supply chain predicted risk page appears, showing you more information about the risk and a recommended action. For late purchase orders, this recommendation would help to ensure that the purchase order will not be late. For example, the recommendation provided by the system might be to schedule the purchase order for 2 days earlier than the original date, as we can see it in this example. These similar sort of recommendations would show predicted late transfer orders and sales orders based on parameters that have been set up in the system as well. If I were to add this recommendation to my snapshot, which in this case was to reschedule the purchase order to 2 days earlier, I can then go and view the snapshot for this item. This snapshot will show us all of the transactions within our past and future horizon dates and any simulations we may have created to evaluate what-if scenarios for upcoming demand or supply transactions. As you can see, when I click Add here, there is additional simulations that we may be created to evaluate these what-if scenarios. For instance, if I were to add a simulated purchase order with a quantity of 10 and select my subsidiary and location, I can then add this simulation to my snapshot to anticipate what will happen based on this purchase order being received on this date. I can also use the status field to manage the simulation depending on if it's under evaluation, is something that's been authorized, implemented, or rejected. On this page, as I go back here, if after I select my status, we'll say that it is under evaluation. You can see we can go back to our supply chain snapshot, hit refresh, and be able to see the simulation and the effects on our inventory balances with our current orders, purchase orders, and sales orders listed. Now let's actually take a look at our supply chain analytics workbook. Suite Analytics Workbook is a new analytical tool available in NetSuite. It was introduced a couple of releases ago and allows you to create highly customizable workbooks that combine data sets, pivot tables, and charts using a single tool that leverages the new analytics data source. While you have the ability to create an unlimited number of workbooks with data sets that you define, NetSuite continues to add some out-of-the-box templates to help get you started. In the 2020.1 release, NetSuite introduced the supply chain workbook template. This workbook gives us the ability to drill down further into the alerts and information of the supply chain control tower dashboard and provides more information about the late orders so we can form analysis to make decisions based on alerts or see trends with our vendors. If I navigate to the Analytics tab, as I've done here in my NetSuite environment, I can see available workbooks on my account. We'll go ahead and navigate to the supply chain workbook. If we take a look here on the left, we'll see the default data set for this template with a standard set of fields. If we edit the data set, we can actually add or remove fields to ensure that we're able to see the data that's relevant for us. For the purposes of this presentation, we're going to add the vendor name to our data set so that we can analyze our late orders by vendor here in just a second. Now that we've added this, we'll go ahead and save our data set and apply it to our workbook. As you can see along the top here, we have several predefined pivot views broken out by order type. We can see transfer order receipts past due, PO receipts past due, sales order shipments past due, and work order builds past due. Let's go ahead and take a look at our purchase order receipts past due. This is going to give us a default view of those transactions. We'll see here we can analyze any of our past due purchase order receipts and some basic information about them. Since this Suite Analytics workbook gives us the ability to manage this data with pivots, let's go ahead and make some changes here to make sure that we're able to see data that's more relevant for us. First off, let's get rid of the date, transaction type, since we already know that we're just looking at purchase orders, and item, since we're only dealing with a single snapshot and we're really just wanting to work with purchase orders. Then let's go ahead and add our vendor ID to our rows so that we can analyze our vendor performance. Next, we're going to move our supply quantity to measures so that we can see a sum of the quantity. And then also move our transaction to our measures so that we can see a count of the number of transactions that have met our criteria. Lastly, we're going to remove days past due and actually move our location to columns so that we can see our different vendor performance based on location as well. As soon as I hit refresh here, we're going to be able to see our predicted and/or already late PO receipts broken out by location and vendor with the quantities of items and number of transactions. We could apply similar sort of logic to any of the transactions indicated above to give us insights into our supply chain. This workbook gives us the power to define and craft our data into views and pivots for in-depth analysis using all of the fields available to us. Additionally, we can create a variety of charts to represent our data and even put that on a dashboard for easy viewing. If I were to add a chart here, and let's make it a stacked column chart, we're going to filter it by only purchase orders. So we'll change our filter, our transaction type to be purchase orders only. We're going to add our vendors to our x-axis. And let's go ahead and add transaction count to our measures, as well as stack it using our location. As soon as I hit refresh here, I'll be able to see that same data I was looking at in my previous pivot table in more of a visual way. If I wanted to save this chart, I'll simply name this POs late by vendor. I'm going to go ahead and save my workbook and the progress that I've made here. And now this is something that I'll be able to add to my dashboard. So if I navigate back to my dashboard, go ahead and personalize my dashboard by adding the analytics portlet, you'll see I'll be able to add my newly created workbook chart, POs late by vendor. So you can create an unlimited amount of these different charts, pivots, and tables to be able to analyze all of the data from your supply chain from both a order, a demand standpoint, and also a supply standpoint. Now moving on to supply allocation. Supply allocations are designed to match inventory supply sources to demand sources. The goal of this feature is to enable us to meet demand requirements with the right product, amount, and location by the required date. In enabling the supply allocation within NetSuite, we will be expanding inventory commitment calculations to consider not only current inventory, but future inventory on supply orders. When you enter sales orders or transfer orders, which the system really just considers demand orders, the allocation process also considers planned inventory orders and the date by which that supply is required. When supply allocation matches demand orders that have future ship dates to supply orders with future receipt dates, our on-hand inventory remains available to fill immediate demand orders. I know it may be hard to understand without actually seeing this, so we'll show you how this functions inside of NetSuite in just a minute. There are several components that work together in helping us determine how to allocate our supply to our orders. First, we determine and configure our allocation strategy. This really establishes the framework for how we want to handle allocations based on our current and expected supply. Next, we establish the rules we want to determine the calculations for which orders are going to be allocated from our available and our future inventory. This can be based on a variety of different factors like order type, order priority, customer, location, among others. We can have this done every time a demand order is created on a scheduled basis or manually as needed. Once the allocation process runs, we'll be able to see our new expected ship dates, potential delays, and alerts, and allow us to manage any exceptions to this process. So let's first take a look at our allocation strategies. If I navigate to Setup, Order Management, Order Allocation and Strategies, I can see my current order allocation strategies. These are things that will be able to be defaulted and also be able to be selected at the line level of an order. Let's first take a look at my EB available allocation strategy. Here you can see the options I have as I'm building my order allocation strategy. We can see that inventory on hand is always taken into account while allocating inventory. We can also select the future inventory types that should be taken into account as we're allocating our supply, like purchase orders, transferred orders, or work orders. Additionally, we can limit the number of days we look ahead when looking to allocate current and future inventory. Lastly, the next few options are related to the methodology of when we want to actually set the allocation. Do we want to allocate the available inventory as available or complete quantities? And if we want to allow the system to override allocations that we've done manually or have them set as firm. Next, we'll actually take a look at performing a supply allocation calculation. But before we do that, I want to point out a setting that will have a great effect on how your allocations work. If I navigate to Setup, Order Management, and Supply Allocation, Setup, you'll actually have an option to set up your allocation timing, as you can see here below. If I set this preference to perform supply allocation after transaction entry, update, or deletion, then anytime you save a demand order, which if you remember is just a sales order or a transfer order, NetSuite's going to perform a new allocation calculation in real time for each order line. This calculation determines whether inventory supplies can meet the demand on the order by the supply required by date. And we'll take a look at that here in a second. If I navigate to Transactions, Inventory, Allocate Orders, and Schedule, I'll be able to see existing order allocation schedules or create new ones. Let's take a look at my EB daily order allocation schedule. You can see that I have set all the values here on how I want my scheduled order allocations to run. I can use either a saved search to populate a list of orders, as you can see here below, or just define the search criteria right here on the screen. If we wanted to handle this on more of a manual process, then we can run this anytime as an ad hoc process by navigating back to Transactions, Inventory, Allocate Orders. You're going to have all of the same options as the scheduled allocation. The list you're going to see below here is going to be a complete list of all of our demand orders that meet the criteria in the order filters that are set above. We'll be able to see the item, customer, transaction number, and all of our relevant quantities between the order quantity, what's been allocated, and what's already been potentially fulfilled. As you can see in the data set below, we have several open orders with quantities that don't have quantities that are allocated. And for the purposes of this presentation, we're actually just looking at a specific item here, as you can see, as opposed to all of our current orders with all of our current items. So as I mentioned, looking at this data set below, you can see our order quantities are higher than our actually quantity allocated because we are lacking sufficient inventory to fulfill these orders. So let's go ahead and create a purchase order to help supply some of our current order demand. If I navigate to Transactions, Purchases, Enter Purchase Orders, we'll go ahead and create a new purchase order. I'll go ahead and select my vendor for this order. Going to select my location. We're going to have these in our San Francisco location. And then I'll go ahead and select my item with a quantity of 10. As you can see, as soon as I save this purchase order, we're going to see that this purchase order has already been allocated to existing sales orders, as we previously didn't have enough available inventory to meet our open sales order demand. Now, if we navigate back to the Allocate Orders page and refresh, we'll be able to see that our quantities have been automatically allocated to our orders based on our allocation strategy and priorities, and our orders have been updated with new expected ship dates. Now let's quickly navigate back to our purchase order where we've just had allocated our demand. In the items sublist, we can go ahead and look at this allocated demand, see the sales orders that you've been allocated to, and actually reallocate these order amounts or these quantities to separate sales orders if we want to. You can see here a list of all of our open sales orders with the quantities, the supply required by date, the expected supply date, with the ability to select which orders we want to have eligible for reallocation and have the system generate recommendations and ultimately accept those recommendations. This reallocate order functionality can be done from both a purchase order and from a sales order. There may be many times where our supply needs to be allocated to orders that might not fit any sort of strategy or methodology. The reallocate order item screen, which is available, as I mentioned, on both the sales order transaction and the purchase order transaction, will allow us to reallocate those. Lastly, if I navigate to transaction inventory, allocate orders, and order allocation alerts, we can have this, we'll be able to see all of my orders that are going to be shipped late based on my current allocations. We can have this display on a dashboard or in your reminders so that you can stay on top of potentially late shipped orders. This, working in conjunction with Supply Chain Control Tower, can help you manage both supply and demand and ensure your customers are receiving orders on time. That concludes our demonstration today. Today we looked at an overview of the Supply Chain Control Tower utilizing snapshots and predicted risks, took a brief look at the new Supply Chain Workbook in Suite Analytics, and then finished with a quick look into the supply allocation feature now available in NetSuite. I hope this gave you a look into some of the capabilities you may be able to utilize in your organization from a supply chain management perspective. Dino, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks for the demonstration on the enhanced features of NetSuite. Now let's take some Q&A questions from everyone on the webinar. If you have any questions, please enter into the chat area, and for the rest of the webinar, we'll address those questions as they come in.
At this time, we don't have any questions from the participants, but I would encourage anyone who has questions to write them in the Q&A. And Ethan, I might start off with a question. Of the functionality that you've shown today, what is new in 2020? .1 or 2019.2?
Yeah, so of the features that we showed today, the Supply Chain Suite Analytics Workbook is something that was released in 2020.1. And the supply allocation functionality, if I'm remembering correctly, was released in 2019.2. Additionally, on the Supply Chain Control Tower, some of the enhanced simulations and snapshot capabilities were introduced in 2020.1 as well.
Thank you. We do have a question that's come in.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Question is, are there any prerequisites to the supply allocation compared to the control tower?
Yeah, so the supply allocation feature is also does have a requirement for the inventory management cloud service, so formerly known as advanced inventory. And my understanding, and we can validate this, that it also does require the demand planning functionality, but that is something that we can validate and make sure that we get the correct answer back to you.
Thank you.
Amy, any additional questions?
No, those are all the questions at this time.
Thank you, Amy. From a next steps perspective, we always want to talk about your journey in NetSuite. Each one of you have made a significant investment in NetSuite, and our team is dedicated to making sure that you get as much value as possible. At iBailey, we offer a full set of support options, from on-demand support to managed services. Please let us know how we can help you in your journey to success and maybe help you with any of these opportunities. Well, again, I want to thank everyone for attending today's presentation. This concludes our webinar. And again, please reach out to us with any questions you have, and we'll get back to you immediately. Thank you very much.